This is Alex Volkov, the host of Thursday Eye podcast. Welcome to this very special episode of Thursday Eye, where AI is barely mentioned, believe it or not. I want to start by thanking all of the subscribers for this podcast. Consider subscribing. I would appreciate it. What you will hear following this introduction is a recording of a 2+ hours Twitter space we've held on the topic. It features several people who will introduce themselves. It features me, a guy from Korea named Sung-Hyun, another person on Twitter named Atapai. I'm not sure they want to dock themselves, and two Andrews, Andrew McCaleb from Varda Space and Andrew Coate, who's you'll hear Andrew as we discuss the events leading to and the surrounding science around a potentially groundbreaking discovery by a team of Korean scientists from Q Center, as they talk about releasing an ambient pressure room temperature superconductor, which they call LK99. The space was attended by around 6,000 people, and since then around 20,000 people have listened to it. And so I figured I would upload this to this podcast as well, including the transcription for your enjoyment. So I hope you have a fun time listening to this. We try to make the space very information flowy. However, you will hear from time to time space-specific discussions about who needs to unmute and who needs to join. And hopefully the transcription attached will help you kind of understand what's going on. Thank you. Hello, everyone. There's a lot of you here, and I want to welcome a few folks up on stage while we wait for a few more guests, and then we can get started. Thank you so much for taking the time joining us, as you're as interested as all of us in this very exciting, very confusing, very potentially groundbreaking news. So I want to introduce three folks up on stage already, and bringing up another one just now. And hey, Andrew, hey Tapai, and hey, Ben. How are you guys?
Doing well. How are you?
A little bit, palms are a little bit sweaty. This is a insane turnout. Twitter is indeed a public space, one of the biggest that we have, and hopefully X Spaces or Twitter Spaces, whatever they call it now, will hold. And I want to invite Sang-Hyo to speak as well. Hey Tapai, how are you?
I'm good. So good to hear from you guys in person. Alex, thanks for putting the space together.
Absolutely. Andrew, we're going to introduce Andrew, but many folks who are here already follow you and follow your work. How's your evening going, Andrew?
Hey, this has been a wild ride. Thanks for putting all this together. It's going to be great to get all the information in one place for the first time. This is my first time experiencing the full volume of the internet, and it's just been a lot of fun to see all the positivity around the progress.
That's great. So I'll do my best at moderating this. I will maybe preface this that I am not a scientist. Many of the terms that we'll hear today in the space I've heard for the first time a couple of days ago. What I am is a Twitter dweller for many years, and I have collected a list of folks who I personally wanted to follow to kind of see the updates as they roll out. And we've seen many things roll out very quick with a lot of confusion and different replication attempts from different places. And so I just compiled the list for myself, started following. ATPI had incredible content diving into the timelines. I found, I want to introduce Ji-Hoon. Am I saying this right? I think you need to hit the mute button and unmute Ji-Hoon if this is your first time talking on Twitter Spaces. Let me know if you're able to do that, and if not, we'll try to solve this. And as I was collecting folks, and I started seeing that Andrew started doing the replication attempts and even doing Twitch.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hey, Sang-Hyun, how are you?
It's the noon in South Korea, and I'm fine.
This is afternoon, right? It's 1.
Yes, it's 1 p.m. here.
Awesome. And so I was just doing an introduction. Maybe as you were coming up, you maybe had not heard some of it. However, folks in the audience who followed this kind of thread and how we came to be here, I have a thread that I'll post on top here that has all the folks from the Twitter list that I followed. And Sang-Hyun and his team is basically the reason for the space. Me and ATPI kind of found Sang-Hyun. Am I saying Sang-Hyun correctly? Is that the right way to say this?
My name is So Sang-hyun.
So Sang-Hyun.
Your pronunciation is correct enough.
Okay, I'll try my best to pronounce the right names. And so we both, me and ATPI, kind of started following Sang-Hyun, who's in Seoul currently, and definitely speaks the language we don't speak, and so does a lot of insight and translation. And so I guess we'll get started. Sang-Hyun, feel free to present yourself, and then talk a little bit about your last few days and how you came around getting interested in this topic, and then how kind of what you found so far.
I didn't really expect to speak.
That's okay. That's okay.
Have put me on the spot. Yeah.
I don't want to throw you on the spot, but give us maybe a brief summary.
Maybe do you want me to help Sang-Hyun?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You have read my write-up, so maybe you can explain what's going on.
Okay. So I'm just gonna just to preface everything, I'm writing a work of fiction. So all of you guys are just participating in an experiment. So but I'm trying to keep everything to kind of like factual, and trying to interpret what is kind of happening on the ground, right? Sang-Hyun is much more factual, and he has actually been doing primary source work. So he's been actually digging up the actual Korean language science papers. He's been sitting down with friends. They've kind of summarized and kind of tried to understand what's going on. And he's really the one that's put together this that the the mentor, whose name I think in some transliterations comes out to T.S. Chair, some Dong-sik. The mentor was basically in superconductors, in this idea of this kind of one-dimensional superconductor, and he had this theory.
Yeah. So the name is Choi Dong-sik.
Choi Dong-sik. That's right.
Yeah. Dong-sik Choi. He was a professor in the Korean University's Department of Chemistry.
Yeah. And so he had this idea, this theory, and he had graduate students, and one of those graduate students was Lee, and Lee kind of took up the mantle of this theory, and then they tied up with Kim, who was an experimentalist, and then they kind of discovered this ghost of a trace of a material in 1999. And at that point, what happens is, having discovered this trace, their path kind of diverges. And Kim, the experimentalist, goes on to do a master's not in superconductors. So he does his master's in something else, and then he does a battery materials kind of PhD, and he graduates in 2008. While Lee continues on the superconductor path, does experimental, and when he publishes his PhD, it's both a theory and synthesis of superconductors. And then he graduates, and then he goes to work as a computer science adjunct professor, which Seong-Hyung just found out, like a computer science adjunct professor, and he's there for about 4 or 5 years. He doesn't publish, and I'm guessing at this point he kind of gets cashiered out of academia completely, and he sets up a consulting firm, basically Q Center, and they start taking on consulting work. And then again, the timeline is a little bit unclear on whether or not they continue to work on the product, on what they discovered. And what happens then is in 2017, Che Dong-sik passes, and as he passes, he gets his former students together and he asks them to finish off what they started, to find this superconducting material that they saw a ghost of a trace of in 1999. And he passes, and they have no money, basically. Song-Hyung has done, again, primary source research, and the office space is basically like a 2-story building, somewhere in the in Seoul. It's a very modest kind of office. They don't have much money. My guess is that they need Kim, because Kim is the experimentalist, and I'm guessing also that none of the theory works at this point. The only thing that they have to go on is that they actually did find something in 1999. And Kim, I'm guessing, is also quite practical, because he didn't pursue the superconductors for the PhD, right? Because he's quite practical, he's like, dude, you get me money, I'll join you. You don't have money, I'm not joining you for your wild goose chase, right? So Lee goes out and he recruits Kwon. And Kwon is kind of like, he's a US PhD. He has a research university position. They recruit him and they get funding. And I think Sung-Hyung, you were saying that Kwon is the one on the National Science Foundation of Korea's list, grant, right? I think that's what you said.
So the paper mentions the public grant from South Korea called the National Research Foundation, which is like National Science Foundation in United States. And Kwon is listed as a primary investigator, PI. Is that right? Yeah,
that's right. Okay, so he's the PI. So they recruit him as the PI, and J.H. Kim, who is Lee's partner, basically leaves his very comfortable position as a research director in a hearing aid.
Yes.
Yeah,
the
hearing
company
aid.
is called called
go ahead, Sung-Hyung.
Called iCell, and it manufactures the battery specialized for the hearing aid. Because it is a medical device, they have different standards from other batteries. And the company is a small business in South Korea, but seems competitive worldwide.
So he leaves his.
Let me intervene just real quick, and just to give folks a quick summary. The main paper that we saw the explosion from, that was published on July 22nd, so a week and almost a day, so we're like almost 8 days into this. The 3 people that you just said, besides the first Professor Choi or Chair or Choi, I'm not sure, several places write it separately. So the 3 people, Sukbae Lee, Ji-Hoon Kim, which is the LK in LK99, right? Lee and Kim. And the third person you just mentioned is Young-Wan Kwon.
Yes.
Those are the 3 authors on the paper that kind of was published on arXiv out of the blue 8 days ago. Please continue.
Right. And then, so at this point, they're in 2017, and Lee goes out and does the fundraising. He recruits Kwan, who's a research professor. Kwan is basically, he's on the paper. He's the principal investigator on the grant, but he's still a professor at university. So he's basically, I'm guessing, like a day in the in the office at Q Center. Very modest place. I think the grant size is pretty small, and they get this ESR machine. And again, from what I can tell, uh, the ESR machine, only Kim knows how to use it, because none of the other people are actually synthetic, synthesis people. They're all like theory guys. Kwan is a physicist, and Kim himself, J.H. Kim himself, he's looking for something which you have to know what you're looking for, right? Because that's what he says in his LinkedIn. He's like, I'm looking for something. If you don't know what you're looking for, then forget about it, right? But he knows what he's looking for, and they refine, and they refine, and they refine. And he keeps doing experiments. He keeps refining the experiment, and he goes through like 1,000 iterations. And somehow, starting in 2018, somehow by the middle of 2018, they find it. So that's a surprising thing for me, because I suspect they'd been working on it, before, or Che and Lee had a breakthrough on the theory, so they knew how to narrow the workspace down. But somehow, at the end of the day, Kim is the one grinding through the 1,000 experiments, finally to get a sample that works. And then they
No,
start by
no, 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 no.
no.
So besides the two papers, there is a paper published in April, written in Korean, and in their own words, they describe what prompted their breakthrough in 2018, and it said that so they are putting the material in a quartz tube, and because they cooled it too fast, the quartz tube quenched and broke, and the material left after the breaking of the glass was had the property they wanted. So it was an accidental discovery.
So can you repeat that? Like, what happened? They put it in the quartz tube, and the quartz tube broke accidentally.
Yes.
I see.
And that was the breakthrough in 2018.
I
That's
see.
what they're saying. Yeah.
I just
I
want to
see.
confirm what I hear. The breaking of the quartz tube led to the incidental discovery. This is the breakthrough, as it's written in the first paper in Korean.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just call Atap. Just give me a sec for some logistics, folks. If you look up on top of the space, there's a few tweets we're pinning, and as we go along, we're going to add some information on top of this. The third tweet pinned from Dystopian Breaker has a link to the original kind of Korean paper. So please go ahead, Atap.
So quick point.
Yeah, go ahead.
This could be important because as soon as you expose it to the atmosphere, you're potentially getting hydration, and hydration might be harmful, might be helpful. It from this like little account, it seems like it either didn't do anything or was helpful, but like knowing what temperature it was at when it broke and things like that could actually be really pertinent.
Yeah, so absolutely. Like, so it's not, he does do the 1,000 experiments, but the 1,000 experiments, whether that gets him there or not, at one point in the experiment, the quartz tube breaks. That gets them there. They get lucky, right? So they get lucky. And then after that, things proceed pretty quickly. They isolate it, and then they get the crystallization. They start working on the papers. They start working on the patents. And they start also trying to figure out the chemical vapor deposition process. they seem to have made some headway on the chemical vapor deposition process. And then, sometime around September 2021, some things start happening. Kwon takes a position, a sabbatical at, I think, Seoul National University at that point. I'm not sure whether that means he's putting more time in the office or not. And then that fast forwards to, yeah, go ahead, Sung-Hyun.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so that fast forwards to about March 2023, when basically the international patent has been filed, and Kwon leaves the team at this time. I'm not sure when Hyung-Tak Kim comes on board. That's not very clear to me at what point Hyung-Tak comes on board. So I'm guessing it's after the Nature paper gets dinged in 2020. And the other thing that strikes me also is that every single person on the team is very aware of every single hoax in superconductors to date, right? They all know the space well. They've seen every single hoax before. They know what the hoaxes look like. They know what to look for. They know what diamagnetism is. So I don't think. Yeah, go ahead.
So the date is, so the day before the yesterday, Andrew McCauley posted on his Twitter the translation of the Korean paper at Doctroid. Is that correct? And can you so how did you translate, and can you say something about it?
Andrew, I think he's referring to you. Sung-Hyun is referring to you. You posted a translated paper also, right?
Yes. Now, that was just a machine translation from Google. That was just a very cursory translation.
Okay.
So basically, Kwon leaves the team in March, and then you have the kind of papers being released, haphazardly. The next point that we know of them is that they start releasing the papers haphazardly, like late last week. And then we have.
And by they, I think it's important to highlight. By they, Kwon, the guy who's no longer affiliated with Q Center, like this whole endeavor, a business venture that's funded for this purpose. Kwon is no longer affiliated with that. We've seen Sung-Hyun posted an interview in Korean from Friday where I think both Lee and Kim say that Kwon, the guy who published the first paper, is no longer affiliated. There was some speculation as to maybe the limit of 3 people on the paper is the limit of the Nobel Prize, or Nobel Prize limits to 3 authors. I don't have this confirmed, but there's a speculation going around. And it's important to note that like both of them say that the paper was not ready when it was released. And it was released by Kwon, the guy who left the first paper. 2 hours later, 2 hours and 20 minutes later, another paper gets released in the same arXiv with, I want to say, 5 authors, not including Kwon, right? So Lee,
And
the username is Hyung-Tak Kim, the college professor from Virginia, is the username who pushes the arXiv paper at that point.
Yeah, Hyun-Tak Kim is a big name with the H index of 45, and if you look at the paper, there is an error message in Korean saying that bookmark could not be found, which is a usual error message when you did some of the typesetting wrong, and you just don't publish the room temperature superconductor paper with the error that says bookmark cannot be found if you are hurrying, if you are not in emergency.
So it does feel to us, at least from the summary so far, that the paper that Kwon released has different information than the second paper, and the second paper feels like it was released in a hurry and included more people that currently work at Q Center, including Hyun-Tak Kim. And Song-Hyo, I want to ask you this question. You mentioned his H score or something score. Can you explain the importance of that score for Hyun-Tak Kim?
Please, someone else do the explanation.
Okay, so the H score is, because we have a web savvy audience here, it's kind of like a page rank for researchers. It shows you how influential the researcher was, and so a higher score means that more people have been citing your paper.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, more precisely, so like an H index of say 40 means you have 40 papers that each have 40 citations or more. That's a little tricky to understand. So like if I get another paper that has only 30 citations, it won't affect my H index at all. I have to get a 41st paper that has 41 citations to make it rise.
So I think it's safe to say that Hyun-Tak Kim, the guy who submitted the second paper, potentially haphazardly, correct? Like we're saying there's errors inside the paper 2 hours after the first one, so likely prompted by these events, is a cited, very well cited scientist with a very high kind of confidence score. It's not like a random person of the street that decides that there's now a superconductor of room temperature and verified it.
Okay. Sorry for being sidetracked, but I just checked the machine translated Korean paper uploaded to Doctoroid by Andrew, and on the page 5, it clearly says that the quartz tube was destroyed due to internal pressure during rapid cooling of reaction and etc. So I think, in fact, nobody really read it carefully. It is just there about the quartz tube was destroyed.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely, like, probably the rest of us are not very close readers of that paper.
So we can continue on after the upload to the archive.
Indeed. So okay, so it goes into our arXiv, and then all of the events of the last week happen. I don't think any of us expected any of the events to happen. So we've all just been kind of like following along and seeing what happens next. I had no idea that there was a metallics conference in South Korea, and I definitely had like no idea that one of the authors would show up there, and it gets posted on Twitter. And so, and then Seong-Hyung points it out on the FM Korea football message board. And so we translate, what the audience reaction was in a bad translation to get whatever message was across.
If you don't mind, let me interject here, because this is around the time that I found out about this. Alex, Frozen Coffee Alex, I forgot his nickname. We invited him here. He posted a very long Twitter thread that caught the attention of the algorithm and then boosted of this room temperature, ambient pressure superconductor paper from Korea. I think he only started talking about the first paper, and then after the second paper also came out. And I think at this point, or somewhere around there, Andrew, you found out about this. When did you first hear about Twitter drama around LK99? And Andrew, feel free to please introduce yourself officially, and Varda, and how you're interacting with this.
Yeah, so I was just cruising the internet at night, and this came across, I think, my Twitter feed, and so I'm incredibly curious. This is something that has been a bit of a hobby for me, and so I was always interested in superconductors, so it caught my attention. So I'm a mechanical engineer, so full disclosure, I am not a subject matter expert. I am simply an aerospace engineer that has a lot of curiosity and some assets at his disposal. And so reading this paper, it struck me just the simplicity of the process. And so I realized that I probably had the ability to replicate with full fidelity the process that was described in the paper. And so that within about 30 minutes, I realized I should simply start down this road that Twitter was already picking up at the time. There's some conversations going back and forth, and it was the classic scenario where on every superconductor discussion, there's the same conversation that happens over and over again. And this synthesis appeared so simple that it seemed that the most expedient thing was to simply test it physically. And so my work is very receptive of after hours projects. I'm known as the guy that has really aggressive hobbies, let's say. And so I'm always in the back doing something interesting with materials or automation. So within 30 minutes of reading the paper, I had kicked off orders to various chemical suppliers. I'd reached out to overseas vendors to try to procure a couple of the elements. And so it was just kind of an offhand comment that I made on Twitter, and then the ball really started rolling, and I realized that everyone wanted to see this made. And so it was just supposed to be a fun little project, but I was really overwhelmed by the response. Everyone wanted to see this done. I think there's this incredible curiosity. There's this incredible drive. People want to see like incredible things happen for the human race, and so something of this magnitude pops up. Everyone's motivated to drop everything and investigate, and I think that's where we're at.
And I think you met the algorithm at the right place where folks were excited about the future and think this could bring a lot of changes around the future. And you started saying, hey, here's a direct approach. Let's try to replicate this. And I want to just highlight the fact that the materials involved in creating this and the process, some folks say, and please talk about this, some folks say that had this been an attempt at a hoax, it wouldn't be as simple. They wouldn't have released a simple instruction manual, kind of quote unquote simple, that many labs around the world can replicate given the materials and the right equipment, right? So the straightforwardness of this potentially shows some stuff.
So this is a good time for a PSA. I mean, I know that Andrew is well aware of this, and many of the people who've been following it. But in case anybody who's listening isn't, these compounds in vapor form, at any rate, are highly toxic, and you have to know lab safety if you're gonna start trying to experiment with them. You need things like a glove box and all kinds of PPE, a fume hood, everything else. Taking risks with this kind of thing is just really not worth it. I can't stress that.
Absolutely.
Don't try this at home, kids. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of chatter in the beginning, in the first couple hours, about this can be replicated in a garage. And, I thought it was interesting. I thought maybe we've got the opportunity to do it safely. We've got all the right equipment. We've got the millions of dollars of equipment that support our spacecraft business, that allow us to do some of these things safely. And so I thought, Twitter wants to live vicariously through somebody. Why not do this? I ended up being in sort of an interesting middle ground because I'm not in academia. I'm also not trying to commercialize any part of this tech, really just doing it for fun because it's incredibly interesting. So I've got no skin in the game except for making this work in a transparent manner and then getting the materials into the hands of the experts. So I thought if we can leverage some of our equipment and some of our very smart people that we have to speed this timeline up, I didn't see anybody in the United States being vocal about trying to do replication. There are so many stories coming out of other parts of the world that all the labs, there must be thousands of furnaces burning right now trying to replicate this. But I wanted to get material into the hands of some local experts in California. And so that's really our goal is, can we sort of be the face of the internet, do this experiment in a safe manner, and then help advance the science and be sort of a forcing function to doing this replication.
So, Andrew, just before, just a small pause before you continue, I want to ask the other Andrew here on stage, Andrew Coate, if you're able to unmute and talk to us, if you're available, about the potential reasons why all of Twitter jumped on this. Andrew Coate, you had a thread on room temperature superconductors, 2 weeks before this, like almost a premonitions kind of thread. And could you give us some summary? First of all, feel free to introduce yourself, but also some summary of what this means if this replicates, what this means for the world, applications. Can you give us like some excitement of what happens if this is an actual ambient pressure and room temperature superconductor? Andrew? Does not look like Andrew is.
Oh, hey, sorry, my audio cut out for a second. I missed the prompt.
Oh,
yeah.
There you are. You want me
Sure,
to ask
yeah,
again?
thanks. Sorry
Quick?
about that.
Folks, I explained to folks your thread about ambient, pressure, room temperature superconductors that you've authored 2 weeks before the paper came out, and then suddenly this drops. And I wanted you to highlight some of the potential applications of superconductors and give us some of the highlights of what happens if this replicates and this is an actual, real thing.
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of a funny thing. Yeah, I put that thread out there 7 weeks before this story broke. Just I have worked with this kind of stuff in a few different areas now. So it's very, superconducting radio frequency cavities are standard technology in accelerator physics. It's a field I used to work in. My first job in physics was actually in a condensed matter lab using a scanning tunneling microscope to look at, electronic structures of potential high temperature superconductors. So this has always been sort of like a holy grail of material science, sort of a holy grail of applied physics. It's one of these properties, it's one of these materials where the bulk properties come from its quantum mechanical behavior. And when quantum mechanics and its effects escape the realm of the very tiny, it can really manifest as magical phenomenon at our scale in the world of the kind of the bulk matter, the big stuff. So, superconductors are used currently today. They've reached engineering applicability through decades of continuous refinements and improvements. And some of the biggest things to think about in what lets these things get used in industrial applications is their ability to superconduct at higher and higher temperatures. And also importantly, is to operate at higher and higher background magnetic field strengths. And so the way to think about this is that a superconductor, it's allowing current to move through it with zero resistance, but it also perfectly expels magnetic fields. And there's an operating point of these materials where it's basically the current density and the temperature and the magnetic field kind of put the bounds or the performance envelope on the material. So some conductors can carry tons of current, but they can't exist in a very high field. And so, those are hard to make as useful. You can use them for carrying like electricity, which is awesome. But often what you really want to do is generate very strong magnetic fields. So I think maybe the most familiar to most people here would be like an MRI machine, right? Magnetic resonance imaging. So the idea there is you're generating a very high strength field, and magnetic fields are measured in Tesla, for example. So just for context, 3 Tesla is a pretty strong field, and that's what is about the strength used in an MRI. So, MRIs use these cryogenically cooled magnets, or they're not often cryogenically cooled. They're actually often just copper, but they do have cooling. But but they generate this high strength field, and then, you know, it kind of sets all these little protons in your body spinning and dancing in a little, you know, kind of radiating energy. And then you have a pickup coil, which is like an antenna, and the antenna is trying to pick up that energy and kind of reconstruct what's going on in your body. And this is how we can get like a really high detailed, high fidelity, three-dimensional image of what's going on inside someone without any invasive surgery. So it's like, you know, MRIs are a real kind of amazing breakthrough in medical imaging. Superconductors, if they could work without cryogenics, would really simplify and make cheaper and more available high resolution, high fidelity 3D images of people's bodies, not just for making the magnetic fields, but also for picking up the signal emitted by the protons that get put into motion by the field in the first place. So it's kind of like one sort of off-the-shelf example. I think another one that's kind of under the radar, if you don't think about, it's not just in carrying electricity without resistance, which is useful for long-range like energy transmission, that kind of stuff. But if you look at the national grid, I mean, only 5-7% of energy total, which is still significant, but it's, you know, single-digit percentage, ends up, you know, burning as waste.
You're suddenly muffled.
Hey, Andrew, I think, yeah, you're suddenly voiced like you're.
Oh,
Better.
Now it's better.
okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Yeah, so I was going to say, so, you know, national grid scale energy production, right? So transmitting the energy to its endpoint consumption, there's a bit of waste heat along the way. But what's also important to think about is how that energy is produced. It's produced also using high strength magnetic fields. And I was looking into this. There's an experiment where these guys used sort of more modern high temperature superconducting tape to, you know, retrofit a large DC generator, and then it had like a 36% power improvement, right? Which is pretty substantial. It's a serious win. Yeah, so there's, you know, sort of thousands of places this stuff could be used that would really just like, you know, it would either greatly improve the performance, efficiency, reduce the cost, increase the accessibility of what we think of as like high technology like MRIs or particle accelerators. But it would also just decrease the cost of basic things like electricity generation and distribution. And that's just the beginning, right? So, you know, this kind of stuff, there's a really good analogy here actually with a transistor. You know, for years, scientists and electrical engineers and physicists, they had this idea of a transistor, right? If only we could have some kind of simple, reliable current multiplier, we could design all these wonderful things. We could design all these different kinds of logic functions and so forth. And so there was this search for the transistor, like people were searching for something that could do that. And they had anticipated all the places it could be used ahead of time. And it wasn't until at Bell Labs, you know, a very kind of funny crossover here. One of the guys that's on the patent for the transistor is John Bardeen. And John Bardeen's actually the only guy to win 2 Nobel Prizes. One was for the transistor. The other was for the theory of superconductivity, right? Which is Bardeen-Cooper-Schrieffer theory, BCS. So again, it's one of those things where, you know, physicists, scientists, engineers have thought about this for a long time, realized this could be amazing. And there's been this, you know, really complicated random walk through the configuration space of possible materials, right? Which is so high dimensional. There's so many possible things you can construct. So I think I'm very optimistic about the field in general. I think one thing to think about with this particular result, there's so much artisanal craft and mastery that goes into producing these materials in a reliable, consistent way. You know, science, people don't often recognize it's a lot of art involved too, right? Like things that are reduced to expert practice and know-how. And so I'd just be cautious on, you know, jumping to conclusions, either on this particular result, if it's valid right now, but also if some labs can't fail to reproduce it, it doesn't actually rule it out entirely. I think there's some scientists that have traveled to Korea to work with the original authors. I'd look closely at that. You know, I'd also, you know, my internal odds are kind of like a 1 in 6 chance this pans out, and it could be big. But that doesn't mean that it's the end of the search or the end of the race. And I'm also optimistic that getting people to understand what the massive long-term and large-scale social benefits of this kind of discovery could be could help direct a lot more basic science research towards this field. You know, I think we spend a lot of things on like how to make smartphone cameras better, and not a lot of things on, and not as much as we could spend on things like high temperature superconductors. And just as a final example, I mean, so right now, you know, I work as a stellarator engineer. Stellarator is a type of magnetic confinement fusion reactor. The reason the company I work for can exist and the reason there is this current boom in nuclear fusion is because we've engineered these high temperature superconductors to work in higher and higher magnetic fields at higher and higher temperatures. And the big economic breakthrough there came when we can have these superconductors that can work at liquid nitrogen temperatures, right, which is 77 Kelvin. And it's a lot cheaper to make liquid nitrogen and run that kind of cryogenics than it is like liquid helium at like 4 Kelvin. So, we're already reaping some of the benefits of this sort of tech stack maturing over time. And I think it's really just getting started in terms of like the hunt for promising materials. I mean, I'm hoping this results in positive publicity, in more effort, more energy put into the field. I think if this doesn't pan out as the thing, don't give up hope, right? I mean, this is a long-term game. Science proceeds by starts and stops. There's no fundamental physics here that's impossible, right? There's no physical principle that says this can't work, right? This isn't like a momentumless or massless propulsion drive like the EM drive. This isn't like superluminal neutrinos, right? Those things kind of break laws of physics. This is very much in the realm of, physically possible. Seems very, in my mind, seems likely there could be something out there, given the complexity of state space of electronic structures and given how large that space of exploration can be. So I think I'm just kind of, this is a great time to be interested in material science, to appreciate basic science research, and educating ourselves on how good the future can be. I think there's a lot of narratives right now in society and culture in general that kind of say like, we can't solve our way out of our biggest problems today, right? And I'm very much on the other side of that debate. I think we can. I think it's through efforts like this. I think it's through people like Andrew at Varda that are willing to do stuff in their backyard or their garage or their workplace on their extra time. I mean, this is the let's build mentality, right? And so I think we can build our way out of the world's greatest problems. And I think it's fundamental scientific advances like this discovery could be that kind of pave the way out of there too. So overall very optimistic.
Andrew?
That's incredibly well said. That is an incredibly well balanced viewpoint. So how would you advise people to absorb the next week of the news cycle? I mean, we're very much on a, we're back, it's dead, we're back type of hype cycle. So how do you advise people to think about the results that they're seeing, knowing that this is a very difficult thing to replicate when just because a negative result is shown at a lab, that doesn't mean it's not physically possible. It's very difficult to prove the negative here. So tell us how we should absorb the news cycle coming up in the next few days.
So I might say something about that. I think this is basically tacit knowledge transfer. And Kim seems to have been this kind of like artisanal, experimentalist. So you need people to actually sit there in the lab with this guy, and he needs to demonstrate to them, and they need to pick up, and there might be things that he does which he didn't write down. That's my take on it. Given that he's the experimentalist, he's the synthesist on the team. Given that the team seems to have been only like 5 or 6 people, is that this guy is maybe the only person in the world as of 18 months ago. I'm guessing that he managed to transfer some of that to the Hyung Tuk's team. So I'm guessing that at least one more team on Earth has this now, and I'm guessing that this knowledge transfer is now happening to a couple more people. So you need to see this progress maybe 2 or 3 cycles for a bunch of other people to have learned the skill, and then that's when things get interesting.
I mean, you don't really need to replicate to verify this. The team has the working samples. They can just sample to the labs around the world.
Hey there, this is Alex again. If you're hearing this means you're not a paid subscriber and you don't have access to the full episode. There is a little more than 2 hours of discussions with experts And I encourage you to subscribe to access the rest of the recording. Otherwise, a transcription is provided of all of it on my Substack. And of course, you can listen to the Twitter Space recording on Twitter on my account @alttrain. But I do encourage you to subscribe, and I hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far. Thank you.